Hello everyone, and in this video we are going to discuss the game played in the Sinquefield Cup 2022 from the round number 6 between Hans Niemann versus Wesley. As we know that Magnus Carlsen have withdrawn from the tournament in Sinquefield Cup after getting beaten by Hans Niemann, and after a tweet by Magnus Carlsen that he's withdrawing from the tournament, there were pretty harsh allegations on Hans Niemann that he's cheating. Although the Sinquefield Cup is played in the Grand Chess 2 St. Louis, and it's a completely safe place that the players are being checked that they are not cheating, they are not having any metal detector, so it's a completely fine tournament. And after the tournament and after the games, there was an interview of Hans Niemann talking about Magnus Carlsen, Hikaru Nakamura, and the bans on him by Chess.com in the past. So we are going to discuss the game of Hans Niemann versus Wesley, which actually proves that he's not cheating. And yeah, the game is actually very good, so we can simply go and discuss the game. So Hans Niemann playing with the white pieces against Wesley who is leading the tournament, starts out the game with 1 e4, and Wesley with the black pieces replies with e5, knight f3, and knight to f6. And this opening is known as the Petrov defense, and nowadays it's becoming very much popular because it's a good way for black to continue the game. And black usually play knight to c6, and there are already too much theory in this opening. That is the reason knight f6 was played, and this opening was played by Jan Nepomniachtchi against Magnus Carlsen in the World Championship title. White captures the pawn on e5, d6, and remember guys, you cannot capture the pawn on e4 because of queen e2, and you basically lose the knight. Like, if you play queen e7, the knight is being dead, although d6 is a fine move, but it basically gives a good position to it. That is the reason d6 is the best, taking the knight and then capturing the pawn on e4. d4, centralizing the pawn, opening up the bishop. d5, now it's basically like d6, d5 wasting a move, but it's the best. So basically white is having the slight advantage, but not more. Bishop g3, bishop to f5, black is having good centralized knight on e4, which makes the position equal. Short castle by white, bishop to e7, rook e1, short castle. So far both the players are basically developing the pieces, which are the basic fundamentals of chess. Knight to d2, and here we have knight to d6. If you capture the knight in this position, now bishop into f5 is hanging, and after knight into queen into, white is having the bishop pair against bishop versus knight, which gives a good advantage to white in this position. White can even play queen g3 threats like bishop h6, and white pieces are more activated compared to the black pieces. That is the reason black is having a good edge in this position. Very comfortable play. That is the reason black simply decided to move the knight away, because in this position white is already preparing to capture the knight on e4. That is the reason knight to d6, protecting the bishop. Knight f1, white is not capturing the bishop. The reason is, you can definitely go for capturing the bishop, but there are things that whenever you capture the bishop, whenever you trade the pieces, your opponent captures it back, and it only allows your opponent to basically centralize their pieces. Because if in this position after knight f1, if bishop captures in this position, you capture the queen, and it helps your queen to get developed in a good square. But if you capture the bishop, it only helps black to develop his piece in a good square. That's the reason neither side wants to capture anybody's piece. That is the reason knight f1 simply idea is to play knight to g3, which makes king a bit safe. c6, putting a good pawn structure on the queen side. Bishop to f4, and now capturing the bishop on d3. The reason black decides to capture in this position the bishop, because white is already threatened to capture the knight. For example, let's take a random move like a6. In this position, white is completely winning because of bishop into d6. Now the knight is no longer defends the bishop, and if you capture the bishop, you lose simply the bishop. And if you try to capture the bishop on d3, Then after bishop into e7, you capture the bishop, you are hitting the queen and the rook. Like for example, the queen moves, you can simply queen into d3 and you are a piece up. You are 2 piece ups actually, and it's a completely winning position. That's the reason bishop into d3 was forced by Wesley. So queen into d3 by Hans, knight to a6. And the idea in this position of knight a6 is that black wants to put the knight to c7 followed by knight to e6, hitting the bishop on f4. And that's a good square. Knight to e3, bishop, knight to c7, b3. And generally, there are things that white should always try to put the pawn on c3. And definitely, it's actually the best move according to the engine. Not the best, but one of the best. And the basic idea of putting the pawn on c3 is that it makes the pawn structure complete safe pawn structure. And it's good. It's a very healthy pawn structure for white. But I think in this position, the knight on d6 is taking control of the c4 square. So in the future, there could be a good square for the knight to go on c4. That is the reason Hans decides to play b3 in this position. And it looks like white is having a bad pawn structure on the queen side. But actually, the idea here is white wants to play c4. If the pawn remains on c2, definitely it's a bad pawn structure for white. But after knight e6, like bishop e5, knight e4, we have c4 by Hans Niemann. And now it's a good pawn structure, as we have this triangular setup like this, and having a good square on the good pawn on the d4, and basically challenging the center. So after c4, we have knight to f6. The reason Wesley decides to move the knight in this position is because, for example, I'm making a random move again like a6. In this position, white is simply going to capture the pawn, and after c2, we can simply capture the pawn on d5. And after queen d5, you can capture the knight, and after queen e, rook e, you are basically a pawn up. That is the reason Wesley decides to move the knight, so that after takes, the knight is no longer hanging on e4. Rook g1 simply centralizing the pieces, and after rook g1, I believe white's development is all completed, and now black decides to play g6. The reason g6 because it covers all the f5 square from the knight and the queen, and it's a good square. It also restricts some backrank mates in the future. g3 by white, also making sure that there won't be any backrank mates in the future. a6, rook e2, and I think it's a good move by black because black is basically putting the pawns on the white squares, and as white is having the bishop on of dark squares, it's good to put the pawns on the light squares. So yeah, rook e2 by Hans Niemann, and his idea is that he wants to develop on the e5, which looks a fine idea. It looks a practical human move. Rook e8, h4 by Hans, and he wants to push on the king side because his development is already completed. Like, if you try to capture knight in this position, like bishop into f6, because there are many clubs players who don't think anything. They like after their completion of their development, they start to trade the pieces because they do not see anything else. Because guys, after you trade the bishop, after you capture the knight, your bishop is actually good on e5 because it covers every dark square. So it's a good thing for the bishop to remain on e5. But after trading the bishop with the knight, it only benefits black because now he's taking full control of the dark squares. So basically, it's a bad idea to capture the knight. That is the reason h4 trying to expand on the king side, and now we have knight to h5 by black. There is also one move that looks very human, which is h5 by Wesley. So, but after h5, definitely this move can be played, but it actually after king g2, it makes white pawns very soft. So I don't know, perhaps there can be some sacrifices like knight f5 because the king is too weak because the white pawns are just too weak, and black is also not having any light square bishop. That is the reason at the place of playing h5, he decided to put the knight on h5, restricting some ideas like h5 from the white side. Knight h5, and now capturing the pawn on d5, cd, and knight to g2. And I believe white's idea in this position to perhaps develop on the e file, or perhaps to play knight f4, trading of one pair of knights. f6, and that's the reason of knight h5. He wants to play f6 and hitting the bishop. And here comes bishop to b8. What a move! I was going to ask you guys what to play in this position for white, but I just showed you. So basically, after f6, you can't capture the pawn because of the bishop takes, the rook is protecting the knight, and you cannot capture the knight. So basically, it was a fantastic move by white, and actually the only move, bishop to b8. The idea here is, if black tries to capture the bishop, black is losing the knight on e6. That's the whole idea. And like, for example, after bishop b8, what happened in the game is king f7. Yeah, simply defending the knight, and now black is again hitting the bishop on b8. So after king f7, white decides to play g4. That's the idea. And after g4, white simply hits the knight on h5. And like, for example, you can't play knight f4 because the bishop covers the f4 square and you would be simply a piece down. So if you try to go back with the knight to g7, for example, now there are squares for the bishop to go back on g3 or even h2 because you have played g4, and now it's a good position for white because black dark square bishop is just too strong. White black king's looks like it's a bit weak. White can anytime just open up on the queen's king side, and it could be very dangerous for black. That is the reason black decides to capture the bishop on b8, and after g into h5, we have knight to f4 by black. There could be, perhaps, I don't know, there could be some sacrifices on the knight, perhaps after rook e1. That is the reason knight f4, just basically removing this defender from the white side and just getting in with the queen. White king looks weak, and I believe it's a good position for black. Already black is having an edge. So white decides to capture the pawn on g6 with a check. At g6, rook to e1, and I just capture basically taking control of the e file, and yeah, bishop to d6, rook into queen check. The reason white decides to trade both the rooks is because white king now looks comparatively much weaker than the black king. Black king looks a bit safe because of the pawns on f6 and g6, but the king is having no pawn on g3, which makes the white king too weak. That is the reason white wants to remove as many pieces as possible. And after rook into e8, black decides to give a check on g4. And now it's an endgame. We are in an endgame now. King f1, king into e8. Still black is having an edge because black is having 5 pawns, white is also having 5 pawns, but white pawns are just too soft, and white king is also a bit weak. a4, and definitely black bishop is also looking at all the dark squares, which gives black a comfortable advantage. King f7, queen e3, bishop to f4. Many moves were played basically in the game. I just don't want to discuss everything. After queen e4, it's a bad idea if you try to trade the queens. The reason is basically it joins all the 3 pawns. Now all the 3 pawns are connected, and it could be very dangerous for white if black tries to push these pawns. Yeah, it's an isolated pawn. Black can simply come in and try to capture this pawn, and it's game over for white. Basically, keeping the pawns like this will only help white to stop this king from advancing. Yeah, so it's a good idea not to trade the queens. Queen c3, white wants to come in with the queen, try to give some checks to the black king. Bishop to d6, king g2, queen check, king moves back, king comes. A couple of moves were played, and after queen e4, now comes critical moment in this position. White decides to play king to e2, which was a blunder. The best move in this position could have been white simply playing knight to e2. After knight e2, for example, if king d7, because you definitely black do not want to trade the queens, because if black trades the queens, it's a fine position, it's an equal position. There is no way for black to come in to capture these pawns, and it's an equal position, you can't do anything. Yeah. So basically after knight e2, black is trying to move the king, and now after moving the king, now black can move the queen from the e4 square. But now comes queen h3 check, f5 and h5, and the position is black still having a slight edge, but definitely a playable position for white. But what happened in the game is king to e2. And after king e2, it only benefited black because now came up with the move bishop h2, hitting the knight on g1, the knight move, and now bishop f4, a fantastic move, making a forced queen trade. Because now the king is on e2, the queen is on e3, the queen cannot move because the king is being attacked. And now white is forced to trade the queens because black is hitting simply the queen with a bishop. So queen into e4 was the fourth move, and after g into e4, knight e1, now the pawns are simply connected. Black is simply coming up with the king, and it's over. Knight g2, bishop goes back to b8, keeping the bishop versus knight. Knight to e3, taking away the squares, but now comes bishop to a7, hitting this pawn. And if you go back with the knight to defend this pawn, king to d5, the pawn is still hanging. For example, if you try to protect again with king e3, now comes a5, and basically it's a zugzwang. White is having no move to continue this position, and only move that white plays, it will only worse the position for white. Like for example, you can't move the pawn because black will capture it. You can't move this pawn because black will still capture it. You have to move the king, and now the pawn is going to fall. So basically, white decides to give a check, king move, and now comes knight to g2. And what white is hoping for, if black tries to capture the pawn, knight check, king move, and knight takes, and it's an equal position. But a good move by Wesley, which is e5. And now you can't basically, now black is not capturing the pawn, and black is just waiting. Now black, I don't know, perhaps black can simply push this pawn first and then capture this pawn, basically taking away the square from the knight on f4. And now there comes a move like d6, sacrificing the pawn because there was only no play for white to continue. Knight f4, g5, trading of the pawns, knight goes, pawn push, and slowly and steadily we have this position. If white tries to capture the pawn, we have bishop into f2, and knight's winning only because black is having two pawns which are extremely strong. So knight to c4, but still capturing the pawn, knight check, king f4, and it looks like black simply blended the bishop. But after king f4, Hans Niemann in this position decides to resign the game against Wesley, and it just proves that Hans Niemann is not cheating. That if you would have cheated, you wouldn't have lost the game, because it was a drawish game till the end. And yeah, after beating Hans Niemann, Wesley is having a 1-point lead in the tournament, and there are 3 rounds to go. So after king f4, the reason white decides to resign the game is, if you try to capture the bishop, there comes e3, check, and basically hitting the knight. You move the king, takes, and black is having a free pawn, and g3 can be a move like king e1. While black is going to give away this pawn, but going to grab these 2 pawns. For example, this takes, and knight's winning by pushing up these 2 pawns, and it's winning. So basically, a good game by Hans against Wesley So, but Wesley So pulled it off in the end. I believe in the middle, Hans Niemann was having an edge till the middle, but after that, I believe, just let me show you guys. No, before that, yeah. Like in the middle part, I believe when white king simply just opened up, and it just only weakened up the white king, and then after black got his chances, and slowly in the end black won the game. So a good game. So I hope that you guys have liked the analysis of the game, and if you like, then make sure to like the video. If you are new to our channel, then make sure to subscribe to our channel, because I'm going to come up with these interesting analysis of the game. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching One Shot Chess.